Hi, I'm Mike. There's light at the end of the tunnel. We're almost done. A few steps left, and granted they're big ones, but soon Erin's going to be planting in her brand new high tunnel as we continue the high tunnel build on our Wyoming Life. Welcome back to the project list. Usually, the list consists of things added to this board behind me. A list we keep in the shop of things that need done around the ranch. Each week we cross things off, and each week we add to it. It's one of those fighting uphill both ways kind of things, but without it, something could easily slip through the cracks. We have branding coming up very soon, and I've already started a new list of things that we have to get done before we brand. We're also going to try to squeeze in a few days of vacation next week, and branding is scheduled for only 2 days after we get back. This is a busy time with tight timetables, and I can't really say I'm a huge fan of it. Like I said, the project list usually consists of things on this board behind me, but for the last few weeks it's been pretty much taken up by one item on the list: Erin's new high tunnel. A high tunnel is kind of like a greenhouse, but at the same time it's nothing like a greenhouse. It's only a single layer of plastic protecting the inside from the out. With no heat, it relies on the sun to heat the inside and keep everything inside healthy and warm. For most plants, it's only a season extender, allowing Erin to plant earlier and grow certain crops longer inside the warmer environment. We started this new high tunnel with the hopes that we could complete it within a couple weeks. Well, we're beyond that now. Over schedule, and I'm sure over budget. But we are getting closer to the end. This week, we hit it pretty hard, after some weather delays. With all the ribs in place and secured, it's now time to start adding wood to the structure. Our lumber is delivered by our local lumber yard and includes pressure-treated 2x6s, regular 2x4s and 2x6s, and OSB sheeting. This lumber will make up the end walls of the high tunnel and the side rails, which we're going to get started on first. The bottom rail of lumber is called the baseboard. This board is a 2x6 pressure-treated board. It's going to be exposed to the outside elements, rain, snow, and wind, and pressure-treated lumber will hold up better against these attacks. Although we can't get one that's 70 foot too long, locally anyway, we're working with 16-foot pieces. That means we're going to have to splice boards together, and in order to do that, we have to do just a little bit of planning. We want our splices to fall between the ribs of the tunnel. So the first board that we put up, we're going to have to cut off to make sure that happens. Each rib is 4 feet on center. In order to get this board to end in the center of the two of them, we're going to have to cut off about 2 feet. Then we're up and rolling. This baseboard serves two purposes. One is to prevent the entire structure from sinking further into the ground. With all that concrete we used, I really can't see that being much of an issue here. But if we were working in soil that could become saturated and move, it's definitely something you'd want to think about. The other purpose of the board is to give the roll-up sides something to rest against when they're down and give support for the roll-up sides of the high tunnel. We're not quite there yet, but we soon will be. The baseboard goes together rather smoothly, and we work down the line, breaking out the clamps for an extra set of hands that I don't have. At the end of the first side, Erin does come over from where she's working at the gardens to give me a hand. Now the instructions tell you to put your anchors on before this step. However, if building another high tunnel, I'd say put on the baseboards first. That way you don't have to take off the anchors and move them out of the way to bolt the baseboards to the frame. With that side done, it's time to do the other. Very much the same way, cutting our very first board to length to stagger out our joints, and then we just roll down the line. Our next sideboard to be installed is what is called the ribbon board. Now this will be another piece of pressure-treated 2x6 as it's going to be exposed to the outside environment. This board is almost exactly like the baseboard. The only difference is that it's up on the side of the ribs of the tunnel. 5 foot 6 inches up to be exact. Now, I'm a big fan of using jigs to make my life easier, and I hate measuring the same thing over and over. So I cut a couple pieces of scrap lumber to help us with our distance. Using the baseboard as a starting point, we can put these pieces in place and use them to hold up the 16-foot long 2x6. Once again, we're moving down the line. Bolting each piece of lumber to the frame of the high tunnel. This ribbon board will make up the top of the roll-up side, and it's also going to be where the plastic that goes over the tunnel will be attached along each side. With all the side rails in place, now we can splice them together. Using lumber and utilizing our scraps, we can cut 3-foot boards to attach the splices together. These boards are then attached to each splice using screws. We screw through both sides to make sure the whole thing is secure and it's going to stay put. Our next step in construction is to begin building the end walls, but before we close up the end walls, we want to get the soil inside the tunnel up to snuff, and we're going to start that part right now. Our soil here is naturally sandy, and we're going to amend the soil using aged manure and peat moss. First thing we do is bring in a little bit extra soil to fill in any low spots. Although most of this can be done with a bobcat, handwork is still needed with a landscape rake to push soil to the edges and even it out. More topsoil is brought in, and then we can run through it with the tiller to mix these two components together. The next ingredient in our soil sandwich is manure, aged manure and compost. This pile's been cooking about 3 years. A mixture of straw and manure that will be perfect to loosen the soil. Manure produces soil carbon, which is an important source of energy that makes nutrients available to plants. Other benefits of manure include reduced runoff and the leaching of nitrates into the soil, which is a problem that we deal with a lot here due to the sandy nature of the soil structure. The mixture of manure and compost is shuffled in from the pasture and piled close by. Then, with the bobcat, we can start bringing it in, where it's deposited evenly across the area, then spread out by hand, just a little bit, to make sure there's no chunks that could possibly deposit too much nitrogen in one spot. And when we're satisfied with it, we can till that in as well. The last step in soil amendment is peat moss. Peat moss is added to the soil to adjust the pH. Our natural soil has a pH of about 7, which is neutral. Tomatoes and peppers, which Erin will plant in this tunnel, like a little bit more acidic soil, so adding peat moss will bring that pH slightly more to the side of the acidic things. Peat moss is compacted into bales such as these, each at 3 cubic feet. The nice thing is it expands when you open it. The bad thing is they're pretty darn heavy. The bobcat helps, and we can open the bags into the bucket, breaking up all the chunks and then spreading it out over the soil. Last but not least, we till it in, completing our soil structure and giving us a nice, fluffy, and nutrient-rich bed for all of Erin's new plants, which are all just begging to get in here. And soon enough, they'll be in here. And all that's left to do is to build the end walls. That's pretty much the last step. Then we add the plastic and the roll-up sides, and we're done. Erin can be planting in here, and all those plants that live in the garage now will finally be out in the wild. A very nice, controlled wild. Kind of like a zoo for plants. Maybe that's what gardens are. Zoos for plants. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me as we continue into the home stretch. When we're done, well, smiles will be wide and drinks will flow, and we'll move on to the next thing, probably without missing a step. It's live stream week. Be sure to join us on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. We'll have a winner for our current giveaway going on right now for that FLIR 1 Pro, and we'll be taking your questions, so we hope to see you there. Until then, have a great week, and thanks for joining us in our Wyoming Life.